Greetings, everybody, and welcome to our 17th Night Vision event today, our second season of doing these Night Vision events. My name's Dave DeWalt. For those who I haven't met, I'm the founder of NightDragon, and I've been in the cybersecurity and national security industry for almost 20 years. I always hate to say how long I've been in it, but it's a real honor and real pleasure to be here today. I have such a special guest I'll get to in just a minute joining us. I'm sure you can see on the screen here, but I want to start out by saying thank you for everybody participating. I know it's late in the day for the East Coast, a little early in the day in the West Coast, but here in the United States, I'm really thankful to have our guest. For those who don't know NightDragon for a minute, you know, we're an investment and advisory firm. We focus in on really looking at the biggest threats and risks in the world. And then what we try to do is we put capital to work and advisories to work to really close that gap or that threat or that risk in the world. We have over 40 companies now as part of NightDragon's portfolios. We have a lot of partners. We have over 100 partnerships now around the world as well. So thank you to all of our partners. Appreciate it. We have over 70 employees and advisors now. So NightDragon is growing, and we're really thankful for all the support that NightDragon has. I think we have an amazing mission here, amazing goal of trying to really create peace and really create opportunities for a lot of the world as it relates to the threats and risks that are happening. So thank you for all of that. One of our major themes we've had over the last episodes, we try to do influence and education in a way that really can bring and advance the cybersecurity agendas in the world. And one of the biggest areas we've focused on recently is women in cyber, diversity in cyber. And we think this is a really important topic. I think we all agree that we need more diversity. We have over 3 million jobs open as we speak around the world. And we only have a small percentage in women. And I'll give you a couple stats for a second. 9 years ago, we had under 10% of the entire cybersecurity workforce have gender diversification, women in cyber, less than 10%. We've made a lot of progress. In 2021, we now have 25% of the cybersecurity workforce have gender diversification. So a lot of progress. We've more than doubled that. But if you think about how far we have yet to go, we need to double it again. And we here at NightDragon and our guests try to educate that problem. We now have some of the best leadership in the world, particularly in the US government, that are women now. And Jen Easterly, who's running CISA, and Newberger. I come from Delta Airlines. I've served 11 years as chair of safety and security. We have an outstanding woman chief security officer there. Same with United Airlines, but we still only have 17% of the Fortune 500 CISOs be women. So today I have a special guest. Colonel Candice Frost is here with us. You can see she's in uniform. We're going to get to a couple medals there in a minute, Candice. But I want to tell your background for a second. Candice is, you know, I don't even know how else to say it. I hope she doesn't get offended. She's like the badass women, most powerful women. She's amazing. As I've learned her story, it's incredible. Grew up in Iowa. By the way, Candice, I wrestled in Pennsylvania and we wrestled Iowa, so we can talk about that. But growing up in Iowa, went to West Point, which is incredible. And I got to read you a couple things for a second. She's probably getting embarrassed, but West Point graduate, of course, served at all levels of military intelligence in the US Army. We'll get to that. A fellowship at the CIA, 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Bosnia. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Bosnia. Just let that sink in. 2 master's degrees. Who gets 2 master's degrees? Anyway, adjunct professor at Georgetown University, and awards like the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, Combat Action Badge, Parachute Badge. Incredible honors that she's received as a human. If you don't know her, she is in her current role in the Joint Intelligence Operations Center as part of the US CYBERCOMMAND under General Paul Nagasone, who's an amazing person as well. So Candice, thank you for joining. You're amazing. I'll take my glasses off to say hi to you, and thank you so much for joining. Will you start out just for a minute? Iowa, West Point, 2 tours, all the way to CyberCommand. Use your words for a minute. What motivated you to do all this amazing stuff? And tell us your journey for a second, if you would.
Well, thanks, Dave. And I really appreciate the opportunity to get to discuss with you and this great audience that you have. Really, my journey started, and this is like most of us, what are we going to do with our lives? I had a high school guidance counselor tell me about West Point. I had no idea. My parents weren't in the military. I didn't know very much about the military at all. I said, hey, it's a school in New York, and I want to get out of Iowa, even though I say go Hawks. And so that there lay the future in the fact that I started soldiering, and the more I did it, the more I kind of fell in love with the job. It really is a profession, and a true passion of mine to kind of go and be a part of the larger Department of Defense and how we secure our nation and national security. So it's taken me all over the world. I have had a great adventure, and then I've landed in DC and moved all around this area. So I've enjoyed it quite a bit, and learned new skills along the way. I think that's the best part of Department of Defense. I didn't come in preset to eventually land in cybersecurity at the end of my career, but I am very fortunate to be in this place in this time and watch history unfold.
Can we do a little show and tell for a second? Because I'm not used to seeing a uniform so well decorated. So which one's the U.S. Cyber Command again on you?
So the Cyber Command patch, the very large patch, by the way. So, General Nakasone gets props for probably the largest combatant command patch that exists out there.
Good marketing. Yeah, there you go.
And then some of the medals that you mentioned, the Combat Action Badge, my Jump Out of Perfectly Good Airplanes badge, Parachutist badge, and then kind of the rank, my deployment. I went to Afghanistan with the 25th Infantry Division. I was really fortunate to have a great number of teammates from there. So, and then of course I'm an intel officer. So this tells you what branch I am in the Army.
Okay, thank you. What made you want to jump out of perfectly good airplanes? That's just right there. Something wrong with that.
It's a little crazy, but I said, what's the toughest job out there? I want to get, as close as possible. When I joined the military, women were not allowed to go certain branches like infantry or special forces. Fortunately, that has changed. But I said, kind of, what's the toughest job out there? I want to be in that organization. And I was really, they're like, you have to go to jump school first. So I was like, sign me up, let's do it.
I've jumped out an airplane one time and I decided I'll never do it again. So kudos to you for doing it as a job. We talked about the cyber talent gap for a minute and women in leadership. And here you are in one of the most important roles out there and using your capabilities to help further that. I know you're big into mentoring as well. Can you talk a little bit about leadership and mentoring and some of the things you do for a minute?
I think the biggest step that I've tried to take forward, especially now in this new role in cybersecurity, is just understanding and letting people know there are phenomenal jobs that are out there. But like most organizations, if you don't see someone that looks like you at all in any job, it's hard to see yourself in a future role or a future position. So I've tried to go and speak in events like this is a great example of where we can show, hey, there are women in this field. They have been promoted. They're doing great things. They're leading, and they make it a welcoming and inviting space for others to come and join them and kind of grow that next generation. You have to build the bench. And so I'm a big part of that.
Yeah, that's so impressive. And I think you and I have talked about, what, do for a second, a little advice, right? For women, particularly, maybe diversity in general too. You heard the stats from me. Here you are in your role, and I'm seeing all the people on the chat saying Colonel. So if I call you Candice, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. Do I go Colonel? Do I do ma'am? I know it's not
all good. Candice works. Candice works. There you go.
Candice works. What advice do you have to how do you get into cyber? What would you do? What kinds of things do you see that can help us solve that talent gap for a minute?
I think that the biggest part is you've got to have a concerted effort to have like a block and tackle at every turn, right? So in our younger generation, right, those who are like I have teenagers right now, and kind of where are we at with respect to communities? Are we asking our community leaders, what are they doing with STEM? And are they making it almost a STEAM, right? It doesn't just have to be engineering, mathematics. Bring the arts in, bring creative people into this space. Don't make it just a space for people who are very, very focused in mathematics. The second thing is at the college level, right? Internships. Majority of companies that are out there, like if you offer a paid internship to a college student, they would love to get off eating ramen, right? So paying some of those bills down, that makes a huge difference. And it also kind of shows them this is a potential career field maybe you didn't know about. I see a ton of nonprofits that are reaching out in that way, and it makes a big difference.
You've talked a little bit about vets as well, and I'm passionate about this area because I think for those who know my background, I ran Mandiant, ran FireEye, ran McAfee. Some of my greatest leaders and most dedicated, employees over the years were vets, and their mission, their motivation is unparalleled. I mean, what can we do there? I mean, is there more we can do with vets there?
I think the biggest thing with veterans are in the transition, there are opportunities like SkillBridge where you can reach out and say, hey, my company would like to bring a veteran on as they're transitioning from active duty or National Guard their time to come and work in my organization for anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And that kind of gives them a taste of, hey, this may be something you want to do. And by the way, the government is paying for their salary during that time. So it's almost like a paid internship for them. They can see that through great examples like Higher Military, SkillBridge. But then the flip side is bringing veterans on, they might not have all the certifications. They might not meet every single mark in what you're putting a job out for, but letting your hiring managers know, man, they have skills that we just, we can't necessarily train in the rest of the workforce. They come pre-baked. They understand mission. They understand security. Some of those things that not everybody on the street has gone through with respect to their backgrounds. And I think that's one of the advantages to having a veteran.
Well, I love your passion for that. And I want to turn to kind of your current role and some of the threats, but I do want to say one thing, and I think you know this, NightDragon, we're incredibly passionate about the cyber education talent problem, the gap. We're doing everything in our power. I think, at the RSA Summit, we launched a whole next generation talent initiative. We raised $1 million to put over 10,000 students in the San Francisco Bay Area through a cyber curriculum. I'm really thankful for a lot of the companies who donated money and paid it forward a little bit, but still 10,000 jobs doesn't solve millions and millions of jobs. So we've got to create a nationwide program. We got to create a global program. We got to get the vets involved. We got to get a lot more of the youth. I like to call it K through gray. I've heard that term, and kindergarten through gray. What can we do more together is really a passion of mine. I know it for yours and the mentoring as well. Candice, talk a little bit about your current role, if you would, and just educate people on the U.S. Cyber Command for a second. We have people who know it, but there's a lot of people outside the United States that connect with us as well, and then a little of your role and what you do.
Sure. I'll start kind of with my role as the Joint Intelligence Operations Center Commander. Our job really is to produce intelligence. We support the United States Cyber Command, its components, task forces that are out there, and then the national intelligence community with accurate, relevant, timely intelligence to say, like, hey, this is where the enemy is at. This is what we think that they're doing. And then we help those operators, those frontline defenders or people who are on the offense to go forward in a planning effort when they're executing operations. And then on the flip side, on the assessment side, hey, what kind of role did it have? What was the impact for that? So we really look at that operation both in the Department of Defense information networks and then in totality with respect to what we do on for the whole of nation. And then lastly, kind of as I'm looking at the activities and role, we help out with offensive operations as well that are occurring at the United States Cyber Command. Looking, at a larger picture rather than the small area that I do on the intel side, when we look larger at the United States Cyber Command, their mission is both persistent engagement and defending forward. So just making sure our networks are safe, are secure, and that we can kind of maintain that preeminence that we are fortunate to have. It's mission assurance. The function itself is for the Department of Defense. We both secure, operate, and defend the networks, and we try and deter and defeat strategic adversaries or threats to both the United States and then our national interests. With respect to warning, kind of making sure also that we have an enhanced resilience as well. So it's a lot packaged in a little bit, but it's a pretty awesome mission.
Not to put you on the spot a little bit, but I know General Nagasoni's talked about 5 major priorities, things that are really big picture that he's focused on, which I know trickles to you as in your intelligence command that you're involved with. Can you talk a little bit about that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really funny. We've already talked about the number one priority, and that's readiness, right? And that goes into recruitment later on down of one of his priorities, but really making sure that we're ready. We're ready for what's next. We have the talent that's there. His second area is operations and defense of the nation. So, what we just spoke about, the entire mission and function. And then integrated deterrence, that we make sure we understand both at the national security level, what we're doing to make sure this is not a welcome environment for any type of threat actor that's out there. He is very focused on recruitment, and we are growing the United States Cyber Command. And so with a budget plus up that we received from Congress, that's also incredibly important. Retention and training, and lastly, the joint cyber warfare architecture. Just as businesses out there understand their architecture and changes, we too have to make sure that we're consistently on the cutting edge and working with those organizations and kind of growing ourselves.
Candice, I can tell you, I mentioned at the beginning, 20 plus years here working with the government in private roles as CEOs of companies. It is such an honor to watch the progress we've made the last few years in public-private partnerships, watching our United States government Cyber Command. Admiral Mike Rogers works with us here at NightDragon. Of course, General Nagasoni is a friend, but it also goes to Homeland Security and CISA. It goes to the whole of Shields Up and the programs, the budget, the money. I mean, progress is being made. And, I look at it from a totally non-political point of view, but I look at it and go, we got to keep that progress up. So those priorities, the service work you do, and I'm just thankful to have you even on the show telling what you do and things like that. We just never could gain access quite like this before. So, it's really nice to see. So while I have you on that, this last 2 years, at least from the private sector's point of view with the pandemic, resulting cultural crisis, economic crisis, work from home, work from everything, the threat environment just like, went to the roof, right? And then now we're in the Russian-Ukraine conflict. And, you're on a lot of the front lines to a lot of that. So what could you share? Is there any epiphanies and things that you're pulling out of this recent threat environment that you could share for the audience?
I think the biggest thing when we look at kind of the recent threat environment is how it actually brought a lot of us together. Unfortunately, in some areas of the country, we feel a little bifurcated, not so much in cybersecurity. There is one area where we know what our roles are with respect to, what is CISA doing? Well, they're looking and they coordinate with the FBI, and they're looking very much at our critical infrastructure inside the US. We're a combatant command, so we're outward facing. We look primarily outward with respect to, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, those big threats that are listed out there. So, but we have to coordinate together because there is no front line. There's no and line of departure that exists, and we can draw, okay, this is your area and my area. Cybersecurity is so intermingled that we have a huge amount of interagency cooperation and partnerships. And even with when we look at the business and those tech companies that are out there as well, we have to consistently communicate back and forth for the good of the nation. And I have absolutely seen that change. I've seen it grow, and I think it will impose a cost on those malicious cyber actors and their activities.
If I could for a second, and you might know this, but I've been really passionate personally, and I call it future fusion. And it's just a concept I talk about, but fusing together all the different sort of commands, but all the different threat areas, space, air, cyber, could even be supply chain, crypto, physical, industrial, all those have to come together holistically in order to defeat our adversaries or defend against adversaries. So a lot of the role you're doing, and I love the word this crisis united us, right? This crisis has really stepped us forward in a lot of ways that I see as well. And, I was on some calls where we had 10,000 plus CISOs on a call with CISA. I mean, it's just incredible watching that unity in some ways that maybe this crisis brought about. What else can we be doing there together in public-private partnerships, Candice, from your viewpoint? This is important to us. There's 7,000 cyber companies now in the world. Well, nearly 6,875 on the last count, so almost 7,000. We've got an incredible community from around the world. Any thoughts on public-private partnership and things we could do a little bit more there?
I think the biggest thing is, there are so many different, it feels like from the external, when friends talk to me, it feels like, where do I turn to? And in the government to bring those things forward, should we have something occur? Yeah, the FBI is always the best starting point. And I would say with respect to that partnership, they have done a really good job in connecting CISA and those broader organizations internal to the U.S. One area that I would encourage people to just help us, spread the word and understand is with respect to persistent engagement. Like, we are constantly understanding that there are rules of engagement. There are clear lines that we don't cross with respect to the partnership we have at the National Security Agency and CyberCommand, but that we're constantly trying to work with different companies and through both CISA and the FBI to make sure that we keep these networks well defended against outward actors. And so that continuous cost benefit analysis and sharing of information, sometimes we're not always the best recipients or returning information back to you, but we use the information that's provided to us, and it helps everybody that's out there on the front line.
I've heard it put a few times, sometimes it's just one little piece of information from somewhere in the private sector that could complete the puzzle, and suddenly you have a puzzle, you can see the picture, you can create an action. So I encourage all the private sector to share, to communicate, even though it's not always a lot of reciprocity on that sharing. It can't always be that way, but sometimes you can do a lot of good by creating that one little puzzle piece that creates a picture of the whole. And that's really important, I think, for everyone. Talk a little bit, Candice, if you would. I want to try to keep bringing this to kind of the current state of things and the threats. I know we've made some progress. I can't tell you how proud I am, watching some of the takedowns that we've had. For those who don't know, like the Hydra takedown, this was a 7+ year marketplace that Russia had supported that did a lot of ransomware operations and things. That was an incredible takedown. The Conti leaks led to some of that, which, if you don't know about the Conti leaks, pretty amazing scenario there. You can Google it and look at it. The other day, we just saw China had some interesting sort of payback, let's just say, that was done. Like, how do you feel we're doing? And what's your perspective on sort of the state of the threat there from your viewpoint?
I think we're doing a good job sharing information, but I really like, and I've heard some people compare, this is how we look at the threats in totality. When I look at even the size of my organizations of analysts that are focused on different areas, China first and Russia always, right? China always has, and General Hartman really made a great analogy of, like, China is like climate change, a little bit slower, but it's very large, and you're not going to see it all the time, but it's really going to run you dry eventually. And Russia is like a really bad thunderstorm, if not a huge, hurricane or a system that's coming down and is absolutely going to impact you with bolts of lightning right now. And the way we look at that within the intelligence community is understanding they take different vectors and the way that they're kind of using threats with relation to targeting the United States. And then, of course, you have non-state actors as well. And that's another big area when we look at, talking about public-private partnership. Ransomware was one where we really depended, and rightfully so. It was a great partnership that we started to see with NSA, the CyberCommand, the use of the authorities and expertise to persistently disrupt that ecosystem that was under play. And they did a decent job, but this hasn't gone away. And the ecosystem just continues to grow and grow. And I think that's really where there is no rest at all. And Shields Up is a great campaign for us, the way we think about that, because the system is so dynamically changing.
I like the way you said it, China first, Russia always. Having been on the other side of this private, I can relate to that. I often talk publicly about So the pride I had at FireEye and Mandiant, FireEye, we had discovered, I think I got this number right, 5,572 confirmed IP thefts by China agencies on American companies. So if you start to put that in totality, 5,572 that FireEye saw, and you start to look at that over a period of time, how much intellectual property transfer actually occurred from the United States to China, it's unbelievable. And then you start to look at the Russian attacks and the ransomwares, and I was almost getting sick to my stomach every day to watch a hospital get hit by a ransomware, and to see us starting to make a little progress on that. And I know it's a big battle. Can you talk for a minute? We're in a different era now, and I'm really curious on your perspective. We're in this era of information warfare now and disinformation, and we're watching Russia's playbook really encompass that to the Western world. Can they divide us? Can they create cracks in the Ukrainian support? What can they do? What's your state of information war, and what's your thoughts around that? I'd love to hear that.
I think the biggest kind of enlightening point that we saw within the intelligence community, and Director Haynes did this, was really at the beginning of the invasion, when so many of the false flags were debunked, and the IC released information, and that was phenomenal for the fact of we were able to combat that early and often with respect to some of the areas that Russia tried to use to their advantage. And we got ahead of the game, and it was great to see. In the information space is incredibly complex because for us, there are so many U.S. actors, and we just don't deal on U.S. systems. We look at foreign actors that are out there. So it's incredibly complex. I think the narrative is a part of an area that we've got to continue to really hone and understand the importance of what we do to try to preserve this democracy, the fragile democracy that we know of. And it's a part of what we do in ensuring that we can collect on those actors that are out there that are trying to use the seams against us, and ensure that is passed forward to companies that deal in especially the social media space.
Yeah, I can't agree more. In fact, you probably know this too. I've been funding quite a few companies. One company called Human, but it really looks at the difference between a bot and a human. And it takes in trillions of events and can really, with pretty high accuracy, determine whether there's a real person behind a keyboard or there's a bot behind it. And then is the bot disseminating real information? Where the information come from? So one angle on trying to solve that. But boy, I feel like this is a big gap still personally in the world of information, because the flow, I could set up a website. I'm Russian. I set up a website. It looks like a real person wrote some articles on a website. They then disseminate the information through social media. Next thing, it's viral all over the world. And it's very hard to control what's real, what's not, especially with the advent of bots and things. So, a lot of work to be done on that front. I mean, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. There's a saying, what a lie goes around the world twice before the truth can put its pants on. It's just the rapidity and the speed and the pace. And I think the scale of how information moves around the world is so fast and so rapid as well. It makes it incredibly challenging for fields like journalism that's out there to really have great editors that can quickly make sure what they're putting out there is the truth as well.
I have quite a few questions coming online, but I want to ask you one more from me first. And what's keeping you up at night as you think about going forward here, right? The Russian-Ukrainian crisis is going to come to an end sooner or later. Russia's got a lot of weaponry that keeps me up at night, at least in the cyberspace. From your perspective, what can you share for all of us? Like, where should we focus more shields up, or where should we be thinking about? Kind of what keeps you there?
I think there are two things that I am still very concerned with respect to. Partnerships is a big one that we're spending a lot of effort with respect to in the China area, that we form very strong partnerships with countries so that they are not pulled in as close to China as possible. That's one area. And then the second one, I think we just saw with respect to Costa Rica, a non-state actor holding to us a partner at bay with respect to ransomware, and that change and that growth and potentially how that could impact other states by a non-state actor. That's just another form of terrorism. And that's incredibly important that we really understand. It's, China and Russia, they are transactional in nature. They really have clients, but the United States has partnerships, and we need to grow our ability to have strong partners. And that's an area that I continue to put a lot of thought into.
Candice, one thing that keeps me worried, I'm curious your perspective, is, this whole world of data wiping, potentially data poisoning, potentially as AI modeling gets stronger, poisoning the modeling, which can poison the data and poison the intelligence. This seems to be, a first, second inning of a potentially long game here. I mean, do you see it the same way? As data areas challenging from your perspective?
I think emerging technology and that with respect to the growth of data, really that military that can collect, analyze, disseminate the fastest, they have an advantage. And that's one area we don't ever want to be in a disadvantage because of both the AI. It is transforming warfighting in itself with respect to the pace and automation. So we're continually trying to lean forward, but we are not, the furthest forward on the field sometimes with respect to your sector is so much further in the business side than necessarily the Department of Defense. We just have to work really well together and understand national security is everybody's business. It's not just somebody like me that wears a uniform. We really do have to understand the implications of trade and partners that companies have.
A question came online here. It's a basic question, but I think an important question. Just talking a little bit about, the CyberCommand, U.S. CyberCommand's defense missions and how they differ from potentially CISA's or Homeland Security's kind of defense missions. Just to kind of lay that out for the audience for a second.
The number one thing that we do, we are a combatant command. There are like land combatant commands when you think of Central Command in the Middle East and Indo-Pacific Command in the China region. We are a combatant command with respect to cyberspace, so the information. We protect the Department of Defense Information Network. CISA in their role, they do a ton of critical infrastructure inside the United States and those different areas that they try and keep with respect into the homeland. They are under Department of Homeland Security. We are both focused on making sure that the networks are clear for any of our military operations as well. So we do have more of a Department of Defense outward-facing defensive posture.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I wanted to make sure everybody heard that. You were better at doing it than I would do, so thank you. Let me ask you this question. I'll ask this a little more generic than the question that came online, but where do you think we're at with, I guess, just cyber literacy for a minute? I'll ask this in a general way because, having responded to thousands and thousands of breaches, at the end of the day, cyber literacy is kind of a root cause of some of the breaches, right? I got spearphished, I clicked on something, I thought it was something else. I mean, 90% of the breaches are still related to something that fooled somebody in some way, and literacy is kind of behind that. So, first of all, I would say, like, where do you feel we're at with the journey? Is it getting better literacy? How about our government? Is the government literacy getting better? Like, where are we with that journey? How would you talk about that?
So I would say if we're still clicking on it, we're still not there yet. We are still the human in the loop, both the strongest and the weakest component of any system, because we can critically and creatively think of unique solutions to prevent that from happening. But it's our frailty that causes that. So I think some of the efforts you see certain states moving forward at younger ages, trying to bring forward the literacy. People are actually, I saw somebody the other day on LinkedIn, they had a children's book about understanding, things you shouldn't click on. Like, that's awesome. We should teach kids what's misinformation and disinformation, that area. But we'll see that as children start to get older. They are of a generation that understand it, but it's still something else will maneuver, and they'll start to be a new area in this space. Just staying forward and being able to communicate in language that people understand. I think there's a big divide as well. People that are very close to the problem, and we have this issue in cybersecurity where we can talk to one another very easily and throw out all sorts of acronyms. But when I talk to friends from Iowa still, Sometimes they're not in this space all the time, and I have to decode myself. So we've got to learn in different ways how to talk to the general population about why this is so important.
We can talk entire sentences with just acronyms if you're in cyber long enough, right?
Yes.
I feel like we can do that well. And by the way, I loved, we talked with Jen Easterly a lot, and she was a lot about cyber literacy. She even had a whole song, from Boston, I think it is, More Than a Feeling, converted to More Than a Password, right? So, things that do 2FA and two-factor authentication and just fasten your seatbelt kind of Smokey the Bear kind of things, but we got to raise literacy up because that'll create a better shields up, right? I think overall. Besides Russia and China, a question came in here. Where's the next set of adversaries that you're watching? Like what could you talk about beyond sort of the Russia, China? And we could talk about a few of those, but I want to hear it from you first.
So those are the two really big pillars that we look at. But of course, we look at Iran. Iran had a significant impact, and when Director Haynes spoke on the Hill with respect to, they do once a year kind of a run through all the adversaries, what they're doing. Iran continually uses this space, and we see also North Korea as well in the crypto domain. They understand, look, that is a weaker point that they can kind of walk into. It doesn't require the weaponry. It doesn't require the reach. And cyberspace has access to them. So in the information sphere or in the crypto sphere with respect to North Korea, they were able to kind of move forward. I think the decline of the crypto market has absolutely had a marked impact on North Korea as well, because they depended so much on apportionment of their budget to pay for some of their systems. So there's a flip side to crypto declining.
Can I ask you about crypto for a minute? For us cyber professionals, been in this a long time. The last couple of years has been a little bit of an epiphany for me to realize, I first was taught like, well, blockchain's really secure and like these exchanges are really secure. And then you see a breach a day and you realize the magnitude of crime that's happening, the lack of infrastructure behind it. I interviewed a lot of the cybersecurity companies that do multi-chain monitoring, incident response, and I know the FBI's cybercrime division now has a crypto side to it as well. What's your thoughts on the crypto landscape for a second from your perspective?
I think like many things, especially in the financial sector, so many of these things are built on trust. And that's an area right now that there is just a shaky amount of trust in the entirety in the system. So whereas the blockchain itself is fascinating to look at and see, there are true advantages to going forward and using this. But the potential is the internet at the very beginning was built on a foundation of trust. And sometimes people take advantage of that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. One of the scarier domains, and to your point of North Korea having more access with less tools and capabilities, yet still have big returns from that. That tells you a little bit about the crypto markets in general as well. One more question that came in, and I wanted to hear your perspective. NightDragon, we've been involved with one of the biggest risk areas we see, and it's in the form of the supply chain around the world. And the pandemic really brought it out. We try to fly planes at Delta, of course, and at one point we could barely get PPE and other masks and equipment to even fly a plane because we realized the supply chain was so important to us. But then you start to apply the supply chain to cyber and where things are developed, like software, and we saw SolarWinds and Log4j, and then we started to see hardware and breaches at different levels. What's your take on supply chain risk, cyber, and what we can do about that?
I think the hardest thing for us is to really decouple the interconnectedness of so many different companies and the components that they require, but really understanding where you get your supplies from. You can't just go one level down. I mean, you have to almost go, when we look at supply chains, 3 layers in to understand where every piece, every chip, every component is coming from, because that's where sometimes we have seen the most potential loss, that 3 people down all the way, and some of the component pieces, and they're not built to sustain. I used to work in hardware on the acquisition side, so less so CyberCommand, but more so physical, let's say munitions or equipment. When you dig that deep, then you can start to see some of the flaws, and that's what we have kind of seen in our field.
Yeah, you can really feel it too. One of my companies, Interos, put out a report that really showed the dependencies we had US on Russia, then the dependencies even greater on Ukraine. And then with all the disturbance in that market, what it was doing to the US software, hardware economy as it related. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of companies, different supply chain components, very, very complex situation that's out there. And I like the way you said it. It takes multiple layers of analysis and visibility of the supply chain to know what the risk is and to mitigate that risk. Yeah.
And when you look in, even broader than just hardware and software in the tech world, when we look in national security, the disruptions we're about to see with respect to Russia as a petroleum market, and what it's going to do to Europe, and then Ukraine and they are the breadbasket of Europe, and how that's going to impact. I mean, all of these things are absolutely fluctuating, but the rapidity, I mean, our world is so much faster than the last time disruptions like this occurred. And so that's why the cycles of both, we have to look economics, we have to look in national security, all of these areas are just moving at a really fast pace, and it's an incredible time to be in national security.
Well, I know we're almost out of time. Colonel Frost, I'll end with a very respectful closing here. I am very honored to have talked with you today. You're an inspiration to everyone. Your story is incredible. You're such an amazing EQ, IQ combination, people skills, intelligence, drive, motivation. I'm super thankful. And which one of those medals was the one that people shoot at you when you get?
Oh, yeah. The combat action badge. There you go.
Yeah, that one.
You only need to get that once.
You only get that once. Yeah. Well, listen, I just want to say thank you. I'm honored. I'm really appreciative of everything you do for this country and for all of us. And keep up the great work. Any last comments or advice to people? What would you like to say?
Yeah, my last piece of advice is I'm a big fan of mentorship. And so as you go, and leaders in the field that are listening, really start to look at those people who you mentor to try to bring along. Like, we're all responsible for building our replacement behind us and making sure the bench is wide so that we can bring more people into this field. But if the people you're mentoring look like you, walk like you, talk like you, or from your school or from your neighborhood, that's not necessarily broadening the table. And so we want to invite more people to this table because it's an incredibly fun space to be in. So start to look at bringing in those people that you can mentor and help grow, and lastly, sponsor, right? It's what's said about you when you're not in the room. And if you can bring the next elevation of somebody else and sponsor them into those jobs, it's incredibly powerful.
Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Candice Frost, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate everything you do. Thank you, everybody, for joining NightVision today. Have a good one, Candice. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.